Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. So the new Dune movie is out and everyone is talking about it. We all really liked it, so we decided to do a Dune special where we talk about nothing but Dune. We hope you enjoy this episode. Well, let's make our way over to the bridge.
Today we're going to talk about Dune. Dune, the book, the epoch changing book by Frank Herbert. 1969 was it? I think 19, maybe earlier, 1963,
65, I believe.
65. Okay, so Dune was the first winner of the Hugo Award. It was the Hugo Award was established that year, and Dune won. I think it also won the Nebula. Is it one of the dual winners? We can look that up too.
Yes, it did. It also won the inaugural Nebula Award for Best Novel.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So it changed science fiction, right? It really came along and made science fiction literary. Before Dune, all of science fiction, except for A Canticle for Leibowitz, of course. No, there was great science fiction before Dune too. A Canticle for Leibowitz.
But also nothing that lengthy, too. Like, if you look at science fiction pre-65, there's kind of that typical 200 pages, give or take a dozen pages for the length of your book.
The Isaac Asimov fans out there would disagree with the Foundation series, and those are some tomes of books right there.
That's true.
They did get bigger, Okay.
Would it be safe to say that it was the first mainstream space opera, and those are the things that kind of came together to make it a household name in the way that Foundation isn't?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would. I mean, it has all the ingredients of a space opera, multiplanetary, faster than light travel, alien. No aliens. No aliens in the Dune, right?
But alien-like. Well, the worms, you could say, were aliens.
They're sort of like trans and post-humans, I guess, as well, right? With the Mentats and the Bene Gesserit. But what it did, I mean, I think it also was the beginning of, I guess, what they called New Wave science fiction, right? Where it got away from the Asimov, Clarkian kind of hard sci-fi about the science-y plausible stuff. And he used the science fiction tropes and sort of, orientation to talk about social issues, to talk about religion, to talk about philosophy, to talk about cultures. So, I think it was the first book to really bring science fiction out of a kind of very narrow focus into something that resembled literature, right? And it was very well written for science fiction especially, and it covered a lot of ground. And then it sort of became, The Lord of the Rings was before Dune, but Dune was sort of science fiction's answer to The Lord of the Rings, right? What The Lord of the Rings was to fantasy, Dune was to science fiction. And rightly so. And so then, David Lynch came along in 1984 and massacred it. Totally destroyed
No, he
it.
didn't. No, I can't believe you're saying that.
No, it's a terrible movie.
Oh,
It's
God.
not.
It's unwatchable.
It's
so
not.
ugly and
It's such good
disgusting.
actors too, who who were just directed into the yawning mouth of a badly made sandworm special effect. After Star Wars too, this is post Star Wars. We could actually look at what real sci-fi special effects could be, and you follow that with Dune. It makes it almost criminal.
So I'm going to agree completely with the cinematic experience of like going to the theater and getting that hero's quest. But if you're going to compare it to Star Wars, surely you see how Star Wars completely ripped off, how Lucas completely ripped off Herbert's Dune book.
Sure, but he did a better job than the actual Dune movie. I mean, you could say, who cares? Like if you steal something, you do it really well. Then you're going to get forgiven.
And he is forgiven.
If we're talking about sci-fi movies. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't see how. I honestly, I don't see the relationship. What did Star Wars take from Dune?
Desert planet, heroes, the hero's quest. Mind you, the hero had power in Dune, and
But this is the
it was
thing,
a lowly farmer boy in Star Wars.
I think Star Wars is just a very cliche hero's quest, and that story, the hero's quest story, is in every book for hundreds of years. Like there was nothing new
Right,
about the hero's quest story. Dune is actually different, I think. Like it does not follow that arc.
So you feel there's
nothing like Luke Skywalker,
right? But don't look for like it's not going to mirror it completely. But come on, man! Like you got desert planet and a young man discovering supernatural powers.
Okay,
is that not Luke Skywalker discovering the Force and Paul discovering the abilities he was given by his mother and the Bene Gesserit, like and then combine that with the spice, which is obviously takes it to a more deep or realistic, hallucinatory.
Well, and later on in Star Wars, spice makes an appearance, right? The spice shows up in Star Wars in the book.
Well, Han Solo's a spice runner.
Yeah. So you're not wrong, but I mean, it's I think the hero's quest is not something that Dune started, right? Again, it's like
right.
Marty's saying, Dune is the sort of Lord of the Rings of sci-fi, and it took and so I think it falls into the sort of fantasy sci-fi genre as well. I think Dune and Star Wars both. I mean, like, and in Star Wars they got lightsabers. In Dune they just use actual swords, and which I got a problem with. So
we'll come to that.
We'll come to that, but it's I think they share that for sure. And did Lucas lift stuff out of Dune? Probably. He's established that he's a kind of a crappy writer. Like he's a good filmmaker, bad writer, and so I think when you put that together, why not? And he got there first, and he did a really good job. And even then, so that like again serves to my argument that like when you follow that up, you're kind of come in with the original Dune movie, and then you crap the bed on the special effects. Well, I'm sorry, there's no excuse.
See, I find Lynch's Dune to be very forgivable. I did come from a place where I thought it was junk, probably even like 10, 15 years ago. It was always something it's easy to butt a joke at Dune from 84. Because, the acting at times is really bad and Sting is awkward and like the soundtrack is questionable because it's not as cinematic. It's got lead guitar and Toto doing their kind of proggy 80s sound. There's a lot of stuff like that
to carry half the story. I mean,
and that's the thing, though. I do like the voiceovers, and I didn't find them to be the typical easy way out that film takes with narration, because that is an easy way out. You narrate your film, you're now describing the story easier. The thing is, though, with the book, that was one of my favorite parts about the book. You heard everyone's thoughts. You didn't just hear the main character's thoughts, which usually you get in a narrative novel. You get maybe you'll get two, but in this one you specifically get the thoughts of all the main characters, and there's more than a dozen main characters in the book, and you really feel like you're inside the head of each different character. And that's one thing that I think the David Lynch really held. I felt the experience of watching the narrative with all the characters together, and I will say that's one of my only complaints about the new Villeneuve is that without having any narration, he didn't even add story to the other characters. Yui was hardly in it, who's an amazing character, and it just seemed like no one had character development at all except for Paul and Jessica. Everyone just there was no development at all, character development. So that's something that I'd say, even though I don't like the ending of Lynch's Dune, it gets cheesier, especially the last half, and like the last few minutes just rushed and silly and very 80s, poor special effects. I get it. I do feel it's a strong 80s movie, and it's a strong movie because it shows a proper narrative, and I can forgive it for being 1984. I like bad movies. So
And
it's
it
like
had
bad.
Patrick,
It's bad good.
it had Patrick Stewart in it too. I mean, that's
Exactly.
pretty cool.
That's right. Yeah, retroactively saved that movie, 35 years later, for him being awesome.
Kyle MacLachlan was always there to save that movie.
Who's that?
Can we talk about the good Dune movie now?
Yeah, so let's talk about the good Dune movie now. I agree with you that the 1984, David Lynch's Dune is like a polar opposite of Villeneuve's Dune, and I mean, I enjoyed the new one tremendously, but it does have flaws. I mean, I think the new one needs to be considered an experience. It's a cinematic experience. If you can see it on IMAX or in 3D, or at least in the theater with huge sound, that's totally the way to go. Like it's really, for me, I felt like I was, this was the closest I'd ever had to a psychedelic experience in the movie theater, while completely sober because my children were there, also enjoying it tremendously, I might add, which I don't think they would enjoy other versions of Dune. But like it's so immersive. It's just this, like, you're there, and he kind of tells the story in this, just sort of by having you on the planet among the people. But I do agree, it's a little short on character development, and it's a little short on plot, just sort of taking you through the plot. And I'm really glad, though, that he only did half the first book. I think that's a very good decision. If he had tried to do the whole book in one movie, especially with that style, it would have been a 6-hour movie. So, and I am looking forward to having 6 hours worth of movie for in the future for the first book. But it is a bit of a weakness, I would say, especially for people that are new coming to Dune, that the story, I mean, he really slimmed down the story. He left out elements. Like you said, Yue and some of the main characters weren't terribly well developed.
I think he just made the graphic novel the storyboard for the movie, didn't he? That's a joke.
Well, it might
be. You guys hated it.
I hated that graphic novel. Well, I'm sure it is. I mean, I noticed Kevin J. Anderson. This was my great moment at the end of the movie. The credits are rolling, and one of the main, like, on his own moments with his name was Kevin J. Anderson. It said consultant Kevin J. Anderson, like fully taking up the whole screen.
Oh wow!
I say to my children, no big deal, but we're talking to that guy in a couple months.
Oh wow, that's true. Yeah, we have Kevin coming on the show sometime in the spring.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Well, if we talk about the David Lynch movie as being a lot of telling, like a lot of narration, they always say that in movies and in writing, you always want to show, don't tell, right? That's that. Cory Doctorow said that in the episode when he was on here with us. That's a writing rule, right? And it seems like that's Villeneuve's approach. It's all about showing. He shows, he doesn't tell. Yeah. So if you think about Blade Runner 2049. That movie was similar, with these long sweeping scenes where you see that he's showing and he's not telling, and for me that was the experience here. So Marty, you described this immersive experience. That was also what I experienced, and I like the idea of describing it as a what did you say? A psychotropic experience. It really was. Like, the costumes were phenomenal. The scenes were phenomenal. The CG was unbelievable. The music, Hans, was that Hans Zimmer? Is that what his name?
Hans Zimmer, yeah. A lot of percussion too. More percussion than usual.
Yeah, and it was truly an otherworldly experience. And because it had been a long time since I've read the book. It's so that the graphic novel that we read reminded me about a lot of the plot, because I honestly I didn't have a lot of memory of it. But this really brought back a lot of it. I'm sure there was stuff missing, but I don't remember. And it brought me all the way through, and even the ending, like even that point at leaving it, I didn't feel unsatisfied. And maybe I'm just kind of I see things through like rose-colored glasses, but I kind of liked the ending. I found that was a good spot. It was a nice release of okay, we're in a good spot. Something cool's happening here. I do want the other movie, and my Netflix instinct made me want to click on next. But there wasn't that. But I loved it. I left with a smile, and my 11-year-old son also said, "Dad, that was cool." So that's high praise.
Yeah, that's neat that the kids are liking these slow, dramatic, sweeping cinematic experiences. Yeah.
Well, I was surprised. So I gave my 10-year-old the Dune, the graphic novel, right? That's coupled to this book. And I will say, like, probably Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert. Brian Herbert is Frank Herbert's son. Those two have written a lot of prequels to the master's work and postquels, sequels. But when I read the Dune graphic novel, right, and it only sort of covers maybe less than the movie covers, even, because I think there's going to be 3 of those just for the first movie. I mean, I kind of hated it. It was just, but artistically mostly. Like, I thought, oh, geez, it just didn't have any visual artistic merit. And I gave it to Jasper, asked for it, so I gave it to him to read. And he was also like, I don't know about this, Dad. It's not great. So I was like, oh man, I ruined it. I ruined my kid's first exposure to Dune by giving him an inadequate graphic novel. But then when we were in the theater, and I was just like 100% just leaning forward in my chair like the whole time, and a big smile plastered on me, and I looked over, and Jasper kind of grabbed my arm, and he's like, "This is amazing, Dad. I love it. This is great. This is so much better than the graphic novel." And I was like, "Oh, good. Phew. Okay." It wasn't just, I mean, you can get over the bad experience of the pink and green graphic novel of Dune.
I was totally fine with the graphic novel.
Yeah. But I do think, like, they probably worked to turn it into a storyboard, right? And then you're right. Like, I think the storyboard of the movie and the graphic novel are probably identical, like scene for scene. They probably, like, converged on what the storyboard was going to be, and then they released a graphic novel with that, and then they stuck to it with the movie. And what it is very clear, though, I would say, right? Like, it's very clear in its exposition in terms of walking you through the plot. So maybe they're meant to be coupled or something if that clarity ended up lacking a little bit in the movie. Now, the thing
I don't know. I'd say Villeneuve approached this from his own point of view. I don't think he referred to especially the cinematography. I don't think he would go back to anything else. I think for story points maybe, but for his shots and the colors and all that stuff, it just seems I haven't seen any Dune look anything like Villeneuve's.
No, that's true. No, I agree. I mean, Villeneuve is in charge here, and he's the boss. But the only reason I say that is because, like, this Dune graphic novel is coupled to the movie. Like, they released it. I'm pretty sure they worked on it
I
at
see what
the
you
same
mean, yeah.
time, right? Like, it's part of the same project, so they wanted to release a graphic novel at the same time as the book, as the movie, so that it, they just worked in coordination with each other. But I don't know if that's actually true. I'm just talking out of my ass.
Well, they've come at the same time, so they kind of do. And I think the second book, the graphic novel, is this spring.
Oh, good. Okay.
Spring 2022.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure.
Is it going to be 3 parts? The graphic novels will be 3 parts?
That's what I recall.
Sure. Yeah.
But now that I know what the structure of the movie is, right? So the movies are supposed to be 2 movies for the first Dune book. Basically, each covers half the book, and then the plan is to make it a trilogy, and do Dune Messiah as the 3rd movie. And I'm sure they'll get the funding to do that. Yeah. So he basically, I read an interview by Villeneuve saying that what he wants to capture is Paul Atreides' entire arc, right? So from birth to death, well, from the beginning of Dune to his death, at the end of Dune Messiah. So, I think that's the plan. And that might be the plan with the graphic novels too. I don't know if there's 3 graphic novels planned as the same way as the
No,
books.
because
or
I'm
if
pretty
there's
sure
3
that
for just the first book.
the first graphic novel ended with, I believe, them crashing the ornithopter. So when they
Really?
first crash it, so there's still a lot that the movie covers that the graphic novel didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
But the second book, that's as far as I've read, is the second book, which is Dune Messiah. Very small political novel. There's not much plot. It's really just like an assassination attempt on Paul. There's all kinds of spoilers I could say right now. Should I say it? No.
I've never read any of the books, so I'll restrict my comments to the movie. But I'm the only sci-fi person on the planet who's never read. And maybe that's why I'm kind of a lukewarm fan to it. Like everyone I know who has read it loves it, and I just never taken the time to read it. And so my first introduction to Dune was the 1984 movie, which I hated, and it kind of tainted my whole view of the story, even though I could recognize that there's something here. But so that's on me. So I'll just restrict my comments to the movies. And to be fair, like I liked in the new movie that there was no narration. I really didn't like that in the 84 version. And this felt like it feels like a 3-hour setup for like the rest of the story. So I watched it with my daughter, and we both really enjoyed it. But when it finished, she's like, "Oh man, it felt like it was just beginning."
Yeah.
Like as they're going off into the desert, and I was like, "Yeah, so this is all just it's a groundwork movie to ideally launch into more detailed, awesome part of the story." And so I'm looking forward to it. But it's still, despite that, felt like a full meal. Like I came out of the theater totally satisfied. I was ready to go home, but I did feel like Kevin was saying, I want to hit the next episode. I wanted to binge it, and but I really liked Villeneuve's take on it. I did feel that the intrigue that was narrated in the 84 movie was shown in this movie. I kind of got that there's things happening in the background. There's stuff that I don't need to be hit over the head with, I can kind of get it, that there's political intrigue. There's an emperor pulling the strings, trying to weaken 2 houses that are already strong, and he decides to favor one over the other. And, but my only, we're sitting there, as we were leaving the theater, my daughter turns to me, goes, so they got lasers, and there's this one scene where they laser the way into the room. She goes, why not just keep with the lasering? Instead, they drop the laser, and then they all pull out their swords, and then it's like, medieval times. And so that for me is, and I was like, honey, I have no good answer for you. There's no reason.
It's a plot hole.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's like all these big spaceships land, and who are the Emperor's swordsmen, the sort of elite fighters, mercenaries who get
Sedekar.
Okay, yeah. So they come in, they land, and there's an attack, and they've ambushed, and they all this technology has dropped them into the city, and they pull swords. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Okay, so
we've landed here. We've crossed space and time to land here on this planet and draw our swords. And so for me, that's a problem. I got a bit of an issue with that. At least in Star Wars, it's a lightsaber. It's a laser sword. I mean, we get some of the way there. Anyways, that's my gripe.
There are 2 answers to that. So part of the thing that Herbert invented. So one answer is that what Herbert is doing is actually a giant critique of feudalism, okay, of hierarchical societies, right? And so he has created a world, and he sort of tried to figure out, I think, he put in all these ingredients to make it like a medieval feudal society, but writ large across space. And so they got to have swords. So that's like one kind of answer. The physics answer.
Do they have to, like, does feudalism require, like, the demonstration of feudalism requires a sword?
Well, I mean,
I kind of
I
don't
don't
agree with
maybe
that.
not feudalism, okay, but this is the beautiful way in which he created this genre of science fantasy, right? Like, it is, he took all the tropes and the size and the world building that was in Lord of the Rings and like large fantasy kind of works, and then he sort of overlaid that right onto a science fiction world, and I think swords was part of that. I don't know what he was thinking about. I don't know if this was necessary or whatever. But the thing he invented were these shields, right? So they were, I forget if there's a special name, if the slow shield or something, but the idea is that they have shields which are basically like mirrors. Okay, they reflect the momentum that's brought at them, and so they would reflect a bullet, right? Because like the shield basically gives back whatever momentum is coming at it. And I'm not sure lasers, count there, but lasers are like guns. And so the idea is that like these shields work against projectile things and against fast, hard hits. But that's why they have to invent this whole new technique of fighting, right? Where you can't, the shield will reflect a hard hit, but you got to slow down your jab, and you got to slow down your, to get through the shield. In order to get a knife through. So that sort of makes knife fighting and sword fighting the main kind of fighting again, right? In this weird futuristic thing, because you have to sort of slowly push your way through a shield. That's the only thing that can get through that shield. And that's that. And then I don't think this was, I mean, it's not anywhere in Dune that I've read, but that's, so this might be a Villeneuve creation for the movie, but those slow bombs, right, where like the bombs they'd slow down before they hit the ship, right, and then you see how they sort of slowly penetrate through the shield, and then the bomb goes off, right? So it's like a specialized kind of bomb that everything has to get through these shields. You have to go slow. That's
okay.
The whole thing.
Okay, that's cool. That's different. That's that I can accept. I guess that makes sense. If your shielding reflex would defeat a laser but not a sword, you're going to switch to a sword or a dagger or some sort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, it makes a really interesting like world. The thing when you mentioned that though, I remembered that scene, and it was true that they were hiding from the laser too, right? Like they were like behind the wall, and then the laser almost hit his leg or something, right? Like, and he was like, oh yeah, right. And that part was a bit of a glitch, I think, right?
That's
like
a pothole.
wearing shields.
I mean, it was still made the fight scenes awesome. I mean, it's it's dynamic and fun, and anyways.
And that's what Dune is all about, right? Like this mix between fantasy and science fiction, where they can travel interstellar distances through some weird tunnely type contraption that's never explained, and that's okay because it's Dune, right? And it's fantasy in space. So.
Yeah. There's just so much more, right? Like this is the beauty of it. Like there is so much material to work from, right? That this was just an opening salvo and because it's so successful, I'm sure like we're going to be seeing Dune movies for the rest of our lives, and there's just so much material. We're going to learn all about these tunnels. We're going to learn about the spice and what it does. We're going to learn about the mentats and where they came from. We're going to learn about the pilots that fly the ships and need spice. Like I think it's all going to come, and I think it's going to be great.
I agree. Like a sand planet where some young man like discovers his powers. And did you say there's a character named an Emperor in there, Sam, in Dune? That's it's nothing like Star Wars. So I'm just glad we have that clear.
Okay. Well,
fair game.
Look.
Touché.
Star Wars is 100% ripped off from Joseph Campbell. Okay, so Joseph Campbell laid out 12 steps of the hero's journey, right? And it was about the same time, I think. And like there is an archetypal hero story, it goes all the way back to the Odyssey, like ancient Greek literature, probably, right? And so Star Wars follows that 100% like to a T. So I've got the steps here, right? The 12 steps in the hero's journey. The ordinary world. Oh, we wake up on this, regular planet with a regular Joe kid, and then there's the call to adventure, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up. He refuses the call. No, I can't leave my mom. Then he meets his mentor again. Obi-Wan Kenobi takes him under his wing, and now he's going to train, right? So those are the first 4 steps. Then there's crossing the threshold, tests, allies, and enemies. Right? Like 100%. Star Wars just follows that recipe. There is no, apprenticeship. There is no, a little bit of the refusal of the call. But I think Dune is just a little different, right? He plays a little fast and loose with those rules. and I like that. It doesn't follow the same tropes as Star Wars.
It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
If you come up with a good movie, I'm game.
Yeah, I don't mean to
Yeah,
recycle that over again. I was just
yeah,
throwing one
yeah.
out there because when
That
you
was
said the
good.
Emperor, I was like, oh yeah, wait a minute, Emperor. Let's add that to the list of things.
Sure.
No, that was
Because
excellent.
you get your hero's journey, but you get your specifics like Sand Planet, young man, extra mind powers, Emperor.
But the point is, again, so this is something David Brin said, I think, right, in our interview, or maybe I just read his reaction to the Dune movie. So anybody that knows Dune well knows that it is actually the whole moral of the story is feudalism is bad. The hero is not the hero. He becomes, Dune Messiah is exactly, when Herbert, what he's doing is he's inverting the hero story. He's showing you that, like, anybody who has that much power becomes evil. And it's not even that Paul becomes evil, but a great war and crusade is fought in his name. He doesn't even agree with it, but he's not in control anymore, right? And so Dune is like the inverse story of like the usual tropes. He's trying to highlight for you that eventually, right by the end, that you learn that like Paul Atreides is not the golden boy that like Luke Skywalker is. He's actually, he loses control over the war fought in his name, and billions die because of it. And so it's really a social commentary about like how hierarchical emperor type societies are bad. And I'm pretty sure Villeneuve's going to get that message across eventually.
Well, he made as of today or a few days ago, the movie's made over 300 million.
Woo!
And it cost $165 million to make. So, it's a success at this point. So I think your prediction, Marty, that there's going to be, apart from just part 2 and the third one on Messiah, it could be more than that. It hadn't occurred to me that there'd be more than just those 3, but yeah, maybe this will be another one of those franchises, because heaven forbid we should ever have a movie that's not based on nostalgia or something from the past, right? It's they love these sorts of things. So, and I do too, obviously, but yeah, I mean, maybe as long as they keep being successful.
We shouldn't talk about Dune, and like I guess we shouldn't cover all of Dune without mentioning the made for TV by the Sci-Fi Channel from the early 2000s. It was called Frank Herbert's Dune. Did you guys see this?
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I mean,
yeah, a lot of people. It's pretty much accepted that it's better than the 1984. So it's better than Lynch's Dune. When you talk to most people about this, they'll prefer the miniseries. But it's there was a 3-part miniseries from the Sci-Fi Channel in, what year was that? 2000, maybe, something like that. It was quite early. It had William Hurt in it, mostly no-name actors, but William Hurt played Duke Leto. But they also do what they ended up doing 3 years later, because so many people liked the miniseries. 3 years later, in 2003, there was Frank Herbert's Children of Dune, which is the title of the third book, but it covers the story from Messiah and the third book.
Children of Dune. Okay. So there's a lot of material, and then, like we were saying, his son took up. It's interesting, right? Because Christopher Tolkien took up his father's work and wrote a lot more material about Middle Earth, and like took his father's notes and filled it all out and wrote they weren't exactly prequels, I guess, but there, a lot of literature that came early in the timeline. So the Silmarillion, right, like was way before the Lord of the Rings. And so Brian Herbert teamed up with Kevin J. Anderson, and they've written quite a lot of books. So first there was House Atreides, and then House Harkonnen, and then House Carino. So House Carino, by the way, is the Emperor's house, right? So there's these 3 houses, and so they filled in that story quite a lot, and I'm sure that we'll end up eventually getting movies about that. But then they did a prequel to the prequels. So then they did another trilogy that comes even before House Atreides, and that's the Butlerian Jihad, the Machine Crusade, and the Battle of Corinne. And that gives you like the ancient history. It's like the Silmarillion to the Lord of the Rings. These books tell you why there are no computers, in the Dune universe. So the Butlerian Jihad was this war that happened after the rise of artificial intelligence, and the AIs tried to kill off all of humanity. It's a typical sort of trope. But then, humans basically beat back the machines and then made it, illegal to ever make a machine that imitates the mind of a human. And so that's another, element that he adds to his universe to make it kind of medieval, right? Like he gets away from all the robots, all the computers, all the stuff that, sort of clutter up typical science fiction. And that's why. So there, and that was, I think we looked at the timeline, Tristan. It was 10,000 years before Dune is when the Butlerian Jihad happened.
Yeah, that's when they started to count time. So when you see the 10,000 years at the beginning of Villeneuve's Dune, that really is 25,000 years from now in the history, because you have to tack on another 15,000 years or 14,000 years of history before they banned AI and then started to count time again, 10,000 years to get to Dune.
Yeah. And that's a convenient way to humanize a story, like a sci-fi story, because usually they get so hard to associate with. So, that's a convenient plot thing to make it so that everything is accessible to humans at a human level. You're not fighting against machines that are so powerful. It's kind of a smart way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, I get really tired. This part of the Dune universe that I love, I get tired of a lot of sci-fi where just the computer does it, right? Like, the computers they figure out all the trajectories, they control the spaceships, they're so fast, they're so great, and it sort of it's like Ian M. Banks's universe, right? The culture is kind of like that. They just leave the humans in the dust. They're kind of secondary characters by the because all these computers, machines, and robots have kind of godlike powers. So that is avoided with this plot sort of mechanism in Dune.
Well, David Brin, if you read what he says about Dune, he thought that David Lynch's make of the movie was more true to Frank Herbert's original story. That was his.
I agree.
He had to say about it.
What did you think of the new Dune movie, and what do you think of David Lynch's version of Dune? Email us, let us know. We'd love to hear from you and chat about it. So thank you for listening, everyone. Until next time.